Raza Kazmi is the sort of friend I call to ask questions like, when was the last wild cheetah in India killed? Or how do you hand rear an orphan jungle cat? Or are there any merits to fortress conservation? I'm Kara Tejpal, and this is Stories from the Subverse. I'm the curator of Cataplisms, a project by Dark and Light that meets at the intersection of cats and capitalism to explore the world through a feline lens. In this podcast story, wildlife historian and conservationist Raza Kazmi introduces listeners to the jungles of East Central India. The son of a forest officer, Raza's understanding of wildlife policy and conservation emerges from a childhood spent shadowing his father, years spent in the field, and his own dedicated pursuit of knowledge. Natural history, tiger behavior, forest governance, human rights, and what happens when we cross an ecological Rubicon. These are just some of the topics that audio journalist Anupama Chandrasekharan encountered when she traveled to the Kanha Tiger Reserve in Madhya Pradesh to meet Raza.
So this is where I was sitting and working, and the tiger was roaring was standing at the edge of the cottage. That is where it was roaring from, and then it walked. So this is a fire line for when I sleep here, and then they'll be like. My name is Raza Kazmi. I am a conservationist, writer, wildlife historian who specializes in the East Central Indian landscape. The East Central Indian landscape basically consists of the states of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, northern Telangana, northern Andhra Pradesh, southern Bihar, western West Bengal.
So I grew up in this state called Jharkhand. It was a tribal-dominated area. My father was in the Indian Forest Service. He was one of those rare officers who absolutely loved the forest and his job. So I think the reason I got the kind of upbringing that I did was primarily because of him, because he was one of those almost, I would like to say, old world forest officers who would rather spend all his time in the forest than be in his headquarters. And also he was quite keen on having his family with him. I was basically a toddler, a baby, when we first came to Palamu. Palamu is in the western part of Jharkhand. It was, forested, and you had lots of Adivasi communities living there in the forest. So I was about a year old, I think, when my father was transferred to Palamu, a posting that he was very keen on getting because of the forest. Every time I go to a forest, the first thing I do is I take a deep breath. And I call this jungle ki khushbu, the smell of the forest. It's very difficult to describe it as in what it smells like. But there's something that it just lifts your spirits. The first thing I'll do whenever I'm in a forested landscape is I'll just take in a deep breath and smell the forest. Even now, if I take a deep breath, it transports me back to my early childhood when I first smelled the forest. I have very faint memories, but I do remember going to the forest as a young boy, playing in the campus. You could call it a lonely but charmed life. You were on your own devices. You just roamed around and explored your home and the birds and trees and flowers and so on and so forth. This one time, my father took me on an elephant to this Betla National Park. And there we were shown, my father showed me 2 tiger cubs peering out of a cave on top of the hillock. I was absolutely thrilled. That was the first time I saw a tiger in the wild. When my father retold me the story, I got to know that those tiger cubs had been orphaned. The mother had been poisoned by somebody. And that was my first and last sighting of a tiger for a very long time, which I'll come to why it was so. And then while we were coming back, I remember that we saw a huge leopard sprawled out on this big rock. And that was my first leopard as well. So it was quite the red letter day.
Talking about, cats and capitalisms, and one of the important aspects of what we understand as capitalistic interventions in this landscape has been in the form of mining and industrialization, big dams. For instance, the Azure forests are often in the news these days related to mining, and the Azure forest lie in Chhattisgarh, in the forested corridor that lies east of the Achanakma Tiger Reserve and goes into Palamu Tiger Reserve. Niyamgiri that you hear about, that has often been in the news in the past, that lies in Odisha. This is again in a very important tiger corridor. In fact, the forests of Niyamgiri lie between two wildlife sanctuaries. There's a web of mines and dams that pretty much pockmark all these forests across East Central India.
And my earliest memories are of going to the forest before I started schooling. You just roamed around and explored your home and the birds and trees and flowers and so on and so forth. I remember a particular tiger had been poached. Local boys had put a trap for a wild boar and they ended up catching a tiger in that trap. And when they went, the tiger attacked one of them and one of the boys was killed. And then they, in the process, they also shot with their local banduk and the gun and ended up killing the tiger. And I remember asking my father, crying, why couldn't you save that tiger? And so eventually, over the years, what happened was that as hunting kept on increasing, the animals, basically the density started decreasing, and to the point that finally that what we call the ecological Rubicon was crossed, where the number of animals that were being taken down by hunting were no longer being replaced by natural reproduction. And then when that happens, that is sort of a point of no return for animals unless some very urgent conservation interventions are made. Because what happens is that even if you were to reduce the hunting to zero, but if that ecological Rubicon is crossed, what basically happens is that the animals go in a spiral of extinction. So their natural mortalities, they become much higher than their natural reproductive rate. So even if you were to, make it, hunting was to go zero, the animals would still go extinct. And that is what happened. All sorts of animals went extinct from Palamu.
When we talk of mining, when we talk of dams, another associated intervention that goes hand in hand with these activities is new roads or new railway lines will be put up, mostly new railway lines. The forest goes under tremendous pressure. Even the surrounding forests are equally disturbed because of these infrastructure interventions. And that, as you can imagine, is terrible news for tigers, leopards, pretty much every wildlife. Now, Mandal Dam is coming up in Palamu Tiger Reserve. It was conceptualized in 1967. About 30 villages would be drowned, and the loss of forest would be about 100 square kilometers, which was about 10% of the entire Tiger Reserve's area. a huge area. And how it would have impacted wildlife was that it was right bang in the middle of the seasonal migration route of elephants. This area was rich in tigers. It had all sorts of wildlife, which would be negatively impacted. And then, of course, what you have is that when seasonal migration routes or the traditional hunting grounds, the tiger, they are taken away suddenly. These animals get disoriented. So elephants will start going in randomly in different directions. Tigers will, or other wildlife will start moving out into human use areas, into villages, and then that starts another cycle of conflict. So now imagine for people and for wildlife, what a tragedy this is, that both of them have lost out on the forest which they depended on. The fact that because a lot of these forests don't have these charismatic species of tigers and very visibly rich wildlife, large mammalian fauna, because it has been hunted out. So easier for them to be cleared for mining. So there's a small sanctuary by the name of Gomarda. I'm talking of as late as 2022, which is situated in the eastern part of Chhattisgarh, central eastern part of Chhattisgarh. Tigers, of course, were extinct by then. And we were talking, and one of the forest guards said, a tiger did come in late 2018. I remember his a superior of his was very surprised. He said, then why didn't you tell me? He said, you never asked me. It was quite funny because at that point of time, Chhattisgarh's tigers numbers, entire state's numbers had whittled down to about 20 tigers. Now, the Wildlife Institute of Dehradun maintains a huge database of tiger images, so whatever division they get tiger images from, even though the divisions are not talking to each other, the different forests, all of them send their data to from across India to WII. When we sent it to WII and asked them to run this tiger's image through their database, and then they sent a note with the details saying that this tiger was first camera trapped as a young cub in Telangana. So this male tiger who was born in these conflict-ridden forests, so that is why he knew how to negotiate these forests and how to go about undetected. It was looking for a mate, probably. And as I said, these forests are empty, so there are almost no females. So he walked for 5 years across state boundaries, across various tiger reserves and national parks and sanctuaries. And eventually, his journey after 5 years ended in Debrigarh. Highways, railway lines, small townships, villages. He negotiated everything for about 5 years before he met fate. These landscapes are almost like black holes for tigers. Tigers come into these areas and then they disappear into thin air. Palamu, after a gap of about 2-3 years, from somewhere has got 4 tigers that have come in. Of course, all males, but they are still coming in. One had walked from almost from Bandhavgarh in Madhya Pradesh, had gone through Chhattisgarh and come to Palamu. Another one again had come from Chhattisgarh, Sarguja, and come into Palamu, but he then walked again, and he shows what are the old tracks and corridors that instinctively perhaps these animals know of. He went into Hazaribagh first. It was called Hazaribagh because it was the land of 1,000 tigers, Hazarbagh. But when we went in 1999, everything had been wiped off. Went to Hazaribagh, again probably didn't like it too much, came back and then started walking towards Saranda. Walked towards Saranda, crossed villages, killed some cattle in between, crossed over into Orissa. Went into northern Orissa again, found these forests are pretty empty, had some cattle kills. Eventually walked, reached Simlipal Tiger Reserve in Orissa. Simlipal Tiger Reserve, for more than almost 2 decades, had not witnessed any new tiger coming into that area. So you hear a lot about the so-called black tigers of Simlipal. It is the scientists have established that it is basically a byproduct of the isolation of that population, because all the other tiger forests have been rendered empty around it. So no new tigers were coming in. But for the first time, this tiger had walked all the way from Madhya Pradesh to Odisha, again more than 2,000 kilometers over a year. And now he has settled down in Simlipal and found a home for itself. So one hopes that if these forests in future could be, with the support of the communities, could be revived, tigers and other wildlife will return. What matters is that these forests have to survive. And for that, you need to get the community's support, and you need to save these forests from mines, dams, linear obstructions. If the forests are there, there will always be a hope of the wildlife returning to these forests.
Forest itself, Palamu is no less than Kana in terms of just the quality. The biggest difference is just the wildlife. Like, I cannot imagine seeing animals like this in Palamu, roaming around people and casually hanging out. Tigers being so close.
And in terms of the forest itself?
The forest itself,